Let's
Okay,
get started.
So welcome to Markers and Milestones, where we're trying to figure out what in the world do we do with post-high school students. So we're on tonight just introducing our topic, having a casual discussion among friends, let you in kind of like, I thought about this, it's like a reality show. You could just see the launch of something from four people who kind of know what they're doing. But I just wanted to let you know, I'm Leigh Bortins with Classical Conversations, and I guess my claim to fame is that I have a college degree as well as beyond. And I started Classical Conversations. My friend Heather also has an engineering degree like I do, and so it's she really values education. She's raised three wonderful children who've managed to do all kinds of different things. I have four sons. Amanda has two children that are highly academically oriented, her and her husband. Well, her husband's a professor, and Amanda also has multiple degrees. And then we have our producer, Julie, who, Julie, you're always interesting to me because you don't have all the highfalutin degrees that we do, but your children ask really great questions. And so it just shows you don't need to have one. And so that's what we're trying to do is launch a podcast where we introduce parents and students too to two big ideas. One, college does not need to be the only marker and milestone that helps you advance in your life, so, family, career, but mostly in your purposes the Lord's given you and your ability to know him, to make him known. And then the other one is people want something different, but they don't know what kind of questions to ask or where to go. And so we're going to help people learn how to form better questions and give them some resources to look into over the course of hopefully a weekly podcast. So that's what we're trying to do. The name Markers and Milestones comes from the idea that the New Testament tells us there's a race marked out for us that we run. And of course, in the Old Testament, there's lots of milestones, which were opportunities to share the past and see where we'd come in our life. And so it's really interesting to me whenever your children turn about 16, 17, 18, most people ask, where are they going to college? Wonderful question. We think there's a whole lot more you could be asked. So that's kind of the purpose of our podcast. Amanda, do you want to share with our listeners kind of how we got here and how we've been talking about this over the last year or so before we bring our other two in?
Sure. I think that we got here because we were asking questions about what's next. And while we love a lot of the classical things, college doesn't fit for everyone. And it certainly doesn't fit for everyone right after they finish whatever their high schooling is. Some kids and some of us actually needed a breath, a moment, a bridge, another opportunity to learn a little bit more about who we would be in the whole sphere of our lives before we ever entered the academic side of college. And a lot of parents who love the classics fell in love with the classics and classical Christian. And they don't know that your child is as rich if they are reading a great book and being a great electrician or being in a great trade school or being a great missionary, and that is the richness of eternity. And so opening a conversation about we're aiming for eternity, not for the now, but we have to live in the now. That doesn't always look like college. I love college, and I think you should go to college if that's what you need to do. It's where I fit really well, but it's not where we all fit for our best glorifying of God. And that's just a great conversation to have and a great freedom for a parent to know you have succeeded, even if they don't go to that college name brand that you thought about, or that your biggest detractor said, well, they'll never get in. But I know a lot of unhappy people that went to college. And I think what I want for my own children is that they live a life that is deeply rich in all the ways life can be rich, which is not just academics for anybody past 25. And we all know that, but we don't always talk about it.
That's great. Yeah, and I want to introduce Heather more now. So Heather, for those who don't know her, Heather Shirley is instrumental in Classical Conversations curriculum, philosophy. She helped design our whole DNA, and she's just really been a valued partner to me for the last 20 years. And so she also has three grown children, one married, one in the military, and one very entrepreneurial, working in sales and business. And they have degrees, and yet I know that she knows all kinds of people, like Amanda has referred to, where there's other options available to them. So Heather, could you kind of, I'm going to give you like a long time to talk for a minute here. Could you talk about What is your philosophy of education? What's the purpose? Like, why'd you homeschool? What were you trying to do?
Hmm. Well, to start out, you ask about the philosophy of education, and right here, you all can't see it because it's way
Mm,
too small. But this is the Western timeline of philosophy, and I just got it in the mail, so I'm very excited to have it in the background. Although we can't really see it, so I apologize. But the flow of ideas. Well, thanks, Lee. Well, you opened up, meeting you, in 2002 opened up a world of questions and conversation. And of course, I was, just trying to replicate the public school at home, and then figured out that through joining a community, the communities that you've started, that there's another way to think about education. So, the groundbreaking philosophy for me came from the Dorothy Sayers essay, where she said, education hasn't always been this way. And so let's go back and look maybe at the medieval times, because that's kind of the height, it's a golden age of Christianity. And the scriptures are being copied and monasteries are being formed. And so let's go back and look at, these ways of educating that were not necessarily the way that we experienced. A lot of us here on the call have gone through, public high school and then some on to college. And so that really began my journey with thinking outside of the box as far as education. And in doing so, my kids started hitting, middle school, high school, and I'm saying, how important is the SAT? How important is the college? And we met, we had that mutual friend in the early days, 20 years ago, Bobby Smith, and she'd say, I'm wondering who in higher education, after I've homeschooled, after we've gone through this classical Christian, reclaiming it. We're not there, but we were definitely moving forward in reclaiming some kind of education that was classical and Christian. And she said, what upper university or what ecosystem is worthy of my son's soul? And I just thought that's a different question than the question that I initially started with, that this is an immortal being, and where do I think is the next phase for cultivating. So my oldest, Daniel, I just wasn't, pleased with thinking about necessarily a state university that I'd been to. Not that he couldn't, just enter into that and figure it out. But I wondered if there was something different. But as a homeschool mom, a big part of our journey is validating what we've done. And we think college is the affirmation. Getting into college is the affirmation of the work that we've done. So we have to kind of pull that apart a bit and tease that out a bit. And we're really not trying to perfect modern education. We're not trying to perfect a model and then continue on into a post high school model that we felt had some definite deficits. And so I was looking for other options. So as you know, Daniel did something that was much smaller. It was private. It was a place that they read through the scriptures out loud. And that enticed me. It was entrepreneurial. And we weren't sure that we were going to get any college credit for it. And that was a bit of an angsty moment as far as, as a mom, what does that mean? So he entered a program that was not college credit, and then began to grow and work in that. And then he eventually, it was interesting because colleges wanted what this other kind of in-between world was doing. And so when he moved over to eventually a university down in Charlotte, a small liberal arts university down in Charlotte, they said, of course, we'll transfer some credits. We'll work with you. We will make it happen because we like, the conversation that you all been having up to this point. So in a roundabout way, that was a big part of our journey, is asking a little different questions. And then Emily went on to another university up in New York that was a liberal arts university that I was real pleased with. And I know, you had a child go there. And then Caleb started at a little liberal arts college down in South Carolina. But then he said, Mom, I think I'm supposed to be in the military. And that's the height of COVID that we were going into the military, which wasn't a particularly, I'm like, son, are you sure? this feels very stressful to me. But he did. He went the military route, and I'm just really proud of him and trying to figure out the journey. So the philosophy of it all was really, like you said, as you were saying, Amanda, what is my child kind of flourishing in? Where are they being drawn to? And, how can we, encourage them to continue on no matter the ecosystem, that they're in, my oldest son's named Daniel because, thinking that Daniel was in a system in Babylon, very worldly, very, not knowing God. And Daniel was in the system like that. But he said, let me abide by your fasting rules. Let me do what you want, but I cannot also do above and beyond. And so I really taught my kids along the way that we may meet certain criteria, but they're not the aim. I think C.S. Lewis maybe says, aim for heaven and you get earth thrown in, but if you aim for earth, you get neither. And so, so I really tried to help my kids not be defined by a college education per se, but, and myself. I mean, really, I had to get transformed with what with my own insecurities, but I'm just so thankful for the journey and for the questions and for the Sayers essay, and then for this journey of classical Christian education and figuring out what that means and reclaiming it in our generation a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Amanda, before we get to more of our topic, I want to ask Julie some questions. I had Nora on my mind because you were talking about your granddaughter ahead of time. This beautiful woman has 5 grandbabies, one on the way.
Almost 6.
It's almost 6, and
two are cooking. Yes.
What's this wonderful? So what you've done that neither of the 3 of us have done is your daughter Lauren, who went through Classical Conversations, is actually now a director for Classical Conversations. Why did she direct for us? What did you do that she wanted to copy?
Oh my goodness, I don't know that hopefully she does it much better than I did, but she has a college degree. She went to school for nursing and changed her major because of Francis Schaeffer, How Shall We Then Live, and Reclaiming the Arts for God's Glory, and went to art marketing. And my kids loved the dynamic of family, and I don't know. I mean, I was hard because I was one of those moms that you did everything in the guide because I work for CC and it'll look bad if you don't. I mean, that was the mindset. But she really did. I think as she navigated college, it was a secular state school, here locally, did very well academically, but socially, it was not. It was outside of the nice protected little homeschool bubble that we had. And once she got out, she realized, she found a husband who also values family, but was homeschooling. He wasn't on board quite yet. It didn't take too long, but he's on board now. And she jumped right into directing even before she had kids. So there was a need, and I was a state manager and we needed a director, and I was at my local community, so she kind of did it, and said, this is what I want for my family. If I can read good books with my kids, I think that was her favorite part of what we did. We read when we woke up, we read at lunchtime, and we read before we went to bed. Like, it was all reading, and that's her love language, is reading. So I want to read good books with my kids, and I want to have an imagination about education and all of the freedoms that we have in that. Her homeschooling does not look like mine. It's much freer than mine was. So I love that. I love that I was on the piano and Titus, the 3-year-old, is singing the Timeline song and saying, these long words that he has no idea what their meaning is, but the joy of it, she is making it so joyful. And I hate to say it, I think I made it really rigid. So thank the Lord, she saw the freedom, I think, and the creativity that you can have with CC, and CC lays it out there for the structure, but as far as the family at home, it's a beautiful thing. So
good. Yeah, and our Heather here, her son Daniel is also directed before having children. He doesn't have any yet. Hopefully he'll include them in CC at that point. But Julie's had both grandbabies and the director in it. See, and I've had grandbabies in it, but my kids haven't directed it. So you've done both. And one of the reasons I brought that up is a lot of people are concerned about colleges in the sense of alumni and legacy. And I want folks to know you can go a totally different route in your legacy, your family can still really honor and respect what you've done. And so sometimes we forget that the here and now isn't the only thing we're interested in. We're interested in raising these virtuous people who can go on and do hopefully the better things that we did and correct the mistakes we've made. So Amanda, I'd like you to tell us more about your family and your academic background, because I know your daughter and son and your husband and you do thrive in the whole idea of rigorous academics. Can you share more about what your children are up to?
Sure, I can share a little bit more about what my children are up to. So I have 2 children. They're mostly adults now. That's a whole different ball game. The letting go and letting them do it differently is a whole different ball game as a parent. And that isn't an academic answer. That's just a parent answer right there. So I have one who finished her undergrad and now is working in DC in a public policy firm. And so she is doing the whole work within that circle and flourishing. But the thing that is more, I guess, I'm more proud of is she found a church home and she found people to live with, and her home life is nurturing her. Her faith community is nurturing her. We all are going to work somewhere to eat, and we all like to eat. I'm pretty sure of that. But she's making choices that mean that even if she changes jobs, or even if she goes back and gets a graduate degree, she's making the choices that will let her flourish wherever her next milestone is, because that's the one thing about our culture right now. And it's been this way for a while. Most of us aren't static. Most of us are going to move around and change roles. And so that's where she's at. And my youngest one, the Lord only gave me 2 after about 10 years of marriage. And that is, he is finishing Challenge 4 this year. He is headed into the university model. But he's debating whether or not he's going to choose to get a trade certification because he can make more money than he can working at Chick-fil-A, but he really likes Chick-fil-A's food. So for a teenager who's always hollow, yeah, mom might say make different priorities, but right now he's working on his decision-making on that. And so he is headed to the university model, but he's very open to the fact that we need good tradespeople, and it might be a better choice because he's open to no debt as well. So he's balancing what he's going to spend his effort on. So that's 2. My husband and myself. My husband is a university professor, and he fell in love with the great story about King Arthur and his knights. And he had the privilege of living overseas a lot of his life. And when he came into the university model, he started in the computer science field, and he can code. He just can't code elegantly. And as somebody who can see beautiful code, but not think beautiful code, he switched into the beauty of the words. So that's how he ended up studying literature. And then he did his master's degree in the US, and he did his graduate degree in Cambridge, which is the picture behind me on the wall. And so myself, I did my undergrad in a Christian institution. I did my master's degree in business in a secular institution. And then I went and worked overseas when he was doing his studies, and hung around at Cambridge common rooms with graduate students when I wasn't working in London. So I got to see the community side of life, not the lecture side of life of the Oxbridge system. And that gave me a deep appreciation for what it means to bring a rich life into your world, not just the academics. So I think that's where my appreciation took roots and started for me to be something that I could look at replicating.
So one of the things we need to have a whole topic on is the Oxbridge system, so we know what that word means. Let's not explain it now, but that's the kind of thing that if someone's watching this will know we're headed towards. Also, just the voices here have had varied lives. Heather's lived abroad. I've lived abroad. Julie, I don't know if you have or not. You're a good old Southern girl.
Well, Michigan. I was born in Michigan. I'm a
Yankee.
Yankee.
Michigan. And now you're in the South.
I'm a Southern Belle. Yeah.
But we've had a variety of experiences, not just in our schooling, but also in the countries that we've lived in. And we recognize that that's part of what came out of globalization and the high wealth that we've lived in as Americans over the last 70 years. So there's a lot of aspects that we want to discuss over these podcasts over the next couple of years. So I'm going to ask the 4 of you or 3 of you to answer a question. a little bit of background. So you all know this, but it's for our audience. So I've been approached by some very sincere people who have the resources and the wherewithal to start an actual college in North Carolina. And we have not done so yet because we can't agree on what it is we're even trying to do. We've got the sense that the model that we've been, that most people think of in college and post high school is not quite what we want for our children, but it's hard to know what you want when you've never seen it before. So my question for you guys is, what would you want in a post-high school education for your children? What's the purpose of sending them on to other institutions?
We've all got words. I'd love to hear Heather's words.
I'm letting you think.
Well, as we think about the post-high school, I shared with you all a little bit, just on some of the things that I was looking for. I was looking for something that was more like discipleship, something that was like what we had experienced coming up through high school, where there was one person sewing into a small group of young people for an extended period of time. It wasn't maybe 6 separate classes with bells that rang and then you move to the next class. I was really interested in kind of the holistic human development. So one of the things that I looked for was something like that, and that was again, small, more personable. My daughter Emily, at the college she was at, she had Peter Kraft as one of her professors one of the years, and kind of he oversaw her senior thesis, and there was just a real camaraderie among the professors and the students. And I think the conversations that she would have with Peter Kraft was, you can get an A in this class by getting all the quizzes right, or you can beat me in ping pong, or you can beat me in chess. And so just the real personal, engage another human being in conversation, and don't just sit in a class and be silent and look at a piece of paper and try to get the right answers, but join a conversation and join in with somebody that's further down the road than you. And I think that's the relationship with the professor to the student. The teacher is really, in a lot of ways, the curriculum. The books are, part of the conversation, but the teacher or the professor or the human that's kind of the guide is really, that's what we're looking for, is that kind of mentorship, if possible, if we're able to do that. So
in describing that, and also from your earlier comments, I didn't hear anything about accreditation or majors or coursework, because I would guess that that's secondary to the environment that they're in and the relationships they're going to have. Just like Amanda, like, that's really wonderful what you said about your daughter earlier, because as a single person, I imagine what she's found is difficult. There's a lot of systems set up for married people. There's a lot of systems set up for college students, but once you've left, it's difficult. So it sounds like she was able to acquire the same kind of character and skill set that Heather described. But Heather, you told us what you were looking for. It sounds like you also found it.
I did. I started, early on, just trying to, bring my children into conversations with people that I thought were worthy to imitate, and not that they were perfect, but that they had a sense of themselves. They had a sense of, humility. They had a sense of pushing forward and doing hard things. So they had that great balance. And so to have my children, in conversation early on at some of the conferences that we went to, homeschool conferences or classical Christian conferences, we started hearing, folks like John Hodges that has, kind of a music, literature, history based, humanities based, while still learning, some ideas behind science and rhythm and the world of the quadrivium a bit, with the arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and harmony. And so that interested me, and I hope that possibly we could become a part of a community of folks that were rethinking education after high school. And so yeah, I think there are groups out there, there are folks out there reimagining what it looks like after high school.
Can you tell us a little bit about Hill Abbey and what you did out west with West Callahan?
Yeah. So during the high school years and the first year I graduated, my first homeschool graduate, the way we celebrated was to go out into Idaho with West Callahan, and some of you that are in the new St. Andrews groups or out, know the Idaho group out there. Wes, of course, is friends with Doug over the years, and Wes hosted something called Hill Abbey every summer, where you would read through one of the church fathers or great books that were, kind of the church fathers. And so we went out there and read Augustine's City of God, and it had kind of it's called Hill Abbey, like a monastic abbey. So you had kind of quiet time, you had time of working in the garden. And then we read the whole City of God out loud together. There was about 12 of us. And over 2 weeks, we read, an hour and a half to 2 hours in the morning, a few hours in the afternoon, and having a lunch and having garden work and having quiet time throughout the day. And so it was very contemplative and restful. And I thought, if there's, to have these kind of experiences was, I think, very formational, soul formational, human formational for my kids. So my oldest son got to do that, and my daughter got to do that. I never got Caleb out there, but we were able to do that. And I thought, it was just beautiful, because Wes could talk to us about Latin, he could talk to us about Greek, he could talk to us about the history of the church, of Augustine, of what's going on in the economic and the government systems and empires. And I just thought it was really quite integrated and lovely.
So those organizations, I reason I wanted to bring them up is they're the kind of folks who run those organizations we want to have on this podcast to hear what their vision is, what are the costs, what are the challenges, what are the benefits of all that. But, you mentioned Caleb and Heather. I know that he had just as rich a experience of transitioning from high school into college, because your family invites folks over for conversations. Tell us about some of the things you've done.
Yeah, once we hit middle school, high school, my husband's like an expert griller. So you think, what do you have? Just take what you have. It's the fishes and the loaves. Just take what you have and offer it up. And so we would invite a lot of our CC families over, and we had about a core of 4 families that we would read together. We'd read out loud, some books, Cicero's on Friendship. We've read out loud C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce. We've read out loud Mere Christianity, and some other books. Plato's one of my favorites to read out loud. But we've read some of that out loud together, just 30 minutes, 45 minutes, once a month, and then ate some good food, and then would sit around and talk about it after. But our goal was it was amazing how approachable the old books are. The books about the old books are the complicated ones. It's the modern interpretations and the commentaries that are complicated. But if you can slow down and hear some of these, from Cicero to Augustine, the way they spoke, it just is amazing how they catch the human spirit, and they catch the things that we care about, and the wrestling with meaning and purpose in this life amidst the now that we live in.
And then Amanda, you've given your family a similar experience. I know that your husband and you host movie nights and book clubs with the students in the literary classes your husband teaches. Can you tell us about some of those? And the reason I'm having you guys describe this is because I don't want our listeners to think that post-high school means going to college. You can actually have college level experiences right at home with all your children at any ages. These groups of people you're meeting with, I know, include young teenagers, yourselves in 30s, 40s, 50s, as well as, the college age students Amanda is including. So tell us what you did.
So
what you do.
One of the things that we love to do, because we are actually at a Christian college, is that we want to build community, and community actually doesn't happen in a dorm. It happens in a home in the best ways. That's where people are the most connected. Yes, you have identities in dorms, but community, the one that is multi-generational, the one that looks like your future, is usually found in a home. So we love to have people into our home. And So for some of you, you're hearing the word introvert. You could never do it because somebody's a high level introvert. Yes, 50% of this marriage is a high level introvert. It's still possible. You just figure it out. And we usually have that thing, not always a great griller, Heather, but we usually have food. We tend to have sweets at our end, and salt, sweets and salts for the college students. And we will often watch modern movies, like the ones that are winning awards, that have values we would not necessarily want our kids to replicate. Because the conversation we want to have is what's happening there? What need are they saying they can meet? Do you think it's possible? So we get to have those conversations with the students based on lots of film. My husband teaches, actually, one of the courses that he usually packs out is a dystopian literature course and film course. Dystopias, that's where you take something good and push it all the way out to its logical extreme. And is it still good, or does it bend what humanity needs out in such a way that we no longer can be fully human? Okay, that's a hacking definition of dystopia. His syllabus definition is a little different.
I like it.
But functionally, that's that. The other thing that we do is that we have people in our home, because I live in an expensive state and I stayed home to homeschool, and that created the need for me to find ways to bring blessing into the home that made us able to afford to buy a home, because that was one of our family's goals. And so I have people living with me, and I've always picked people that's dinner conversation would stretch me, whether it's somebody studying the Supreme Court and working on a PhD there, or somebody who teaches math and loves April Fool's jokes, or it's somebody who is coming in as a first generation person from another country and sharing how it looks different. And so our dinner time conversations is usually who read what today and what are we going to talk about. And occasionally it's a little, nobody argues to the point you can't digest your food, but occasionally we get a little arguing. But the other thing that our conversations have is, how are we reaching out to our local neighborhood? How are we blessing the widow across the street who's in her 90s and has buried 2 husbands? Because really a good idea in the abstract that doesn't bring 3-dimensional living into your life leaves you diminished. That ivory tower is a real pain. You are locked up somewhere from the rest of humanity. So our dinner time conversations, and even some of our student conversations, do you love the Lord, and are you loving your neighbor by going out to them as well as reading a great book?
Participating that way. Yeah, that's great. So I'm wondering, let's change the tone slightly here so we don't run out of time. We're going to be doing this weekly, recording weekly. And so, Amanda, you have next week's guest is a friend of yours. Could you tell us about what's happening next week, so people who hear this may look forward to the next podcast?
So next week, although I think it might be 1 week later, so I'll double check that schedule.
Okay. It's coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up. This is somebody who actually thought college was a fit, and then thought that really non-practical degree of philosophy was a fit. And the reason I said non-practical, sometimes we send our kids to college and we want them to go play with the fields that will get them the job. And really, you still need to ask which questions give them more of eternity and will make them flourish best, no matter what their majors are. I know they need jobs. We feel that. We know that. But his name is Jack Burns. He's getting a degree in philosophy, and he's going to be talking to us about how you can tell if your professor has a Christ-centered worldview, and from his experience in the trenches. Because when you're thinking big ideas, how do you know what they're thinking? How can you have a great conversation? How can you push the boundary and hold your convictions? So that's part of what that conversation will be about.
Great. You know, I realized I probably put up the wrong file with the calendar from a couple of weeks ago. Julie, who do we have as our guest next week? It's probably my guest, and I forgot.
I think it is Kent.
It's April 10th.
No, April 10th.
Yeah,
we'll
find a guest.
I have an old schedule. Yeah.
I have a whole list. Don't worry about it. So whether Jack's on next week, which is the 13th or the 20th, is insignificant. But so we have students coming on. We also have people who founded colleges. We're going to be having Elliot Grasso from Gutenberg College on in the next couple of weeks. as well as we're going to be looking at a lineman school, where it's a trade job where your students can go to a Christian institution that uses the danger of electricity and putting up lines across the world to make sure that the students have a really strong faith. We're going to be looking at a new engineering college that's being formed, that's unaccredited and highly financially backed, and is using the Oxbridge model that Amanda talked to us about. We'll be having folks from like YWAM and JARS and various mission organizations, as well as some military experts, and they're from all the branches, explaining, what's the difference between the military when they entered maybe 20 years ago and now they're retiring. So that our students learn to ask questions before they need to join the military, as well as we'll be having people who actually own businesses in the trades that have apprenticeship programs. So Kent Missagard, who's going to be on, that Julie just mentioned, he actually owns a company called Aero South, and he's beginning to hire CC students as his employees so they can learn how to build airplanes, right? And so they get paid to learn how to build airplanes rather than the other way around. So there's just a whole bunch of things that we can be talking about, so much opportunities. I keep saying if there's 350 million Americans, there must be 350 million ways to educate. And we want to start opening our eyes to these kinds of opportunities that exist. So that's my little ad. Amanda, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I'm excited about all the different conversations because part of the great power of Google is that we can find stuff, but what we'll do here is we'll talk to people, the real three-dimensional people. There'll be two-dimensional pixels because it's on Zoom, but the real three-dimensional people. So this isn't just a website. We're talking to real people who really can see you and help you have these conversations. And we're not saying don't go to college, and we're not saying go to the trades, and we're not saying any of that. What we're saying is that you're made for eternity and you get to live it in the now. And there's markers and milestones that we can explore, whether we're just out of our high school experience, whether we're 3 to 4 years out of our high school experience, whether we're plus 10 out of our high school experience, whether we're changing careers because we've served in the military and now are coming back and we need a marker and a bridge and a milestone to reconnect us in some way. All of these are for us. So we're looking forward to these great conversations. And I'm excited to have a mixture of people who've already been there, done that, and some of the people who are just still in the journey and asking the questions in a very real way right now.
That's great. So with the time we have left, we are struggling, and maybe it'll be a listener who responds to a podcast that will help us with this. But myself and you guys have all used the word post-high school to describe these markers and milestones in order to describe kind of the age that we're talking about, as well as the concern that so many parents have as where are we going next, as our children are no longer children, but becoming young adults. And I don't like using the word post-high school because I never sent my kids to high school. And yet that's culturally the word that we use. And so we've been trying to figure out some way to describe that age group. I have started to say more often, but I haven't trained myself yet, to use the words young men and women. That seems like a more biblical term. It also seems an accurate term. And it seems like terms we want to recover because we actually know what young men and young women are. And, the world's kind of confused about that. But, I consider all you gals young women too. So is that who we mean? So it's just interesting thing because it's almost like post-teenage years, or is it the transition to maturity? Like how do we describe these people? Because this also shows the problem with our paradigm. We have one idea. And they're college age students. I want them to be more than just college age students.
Maybe I should be less annoyed about adult becoming a verb form, given all the trouble we're talking about having, right? Adulting. Because I mean, I don't, not favorite. I did get given a t-shirt that coffee helps with adulting as a joke. But we are talking about this stage from being dependent on parents, wholly. There's still a lot of connection, and kids still move back home as adults to being more autonomous in responsibility. And again, that's an American context with single family home units as opposed to multi-generational, I recognize that even many of my friends would have multi-generational homes as their norm. So, but yeah.
What about you, Heather or Julie? When you're referring to your children, what do you say? You say my children, right?
Julie?
I do. I mean, one of my least favorite words right now is kiddos. I don't know why it grates on my nerves, but everyone is calling their kids kiddos. I mean, it's so funny because reading books, you know, do hard things, and what was the adolescence, extended adolescence, you know, this whole thing where culture is trying to keep our kids younger, longer, and more dependent. So I love this kind of this independent idea, like not to, I mean, because they definitely want to be independent from us. They are looking, especially if they are going and living in a dorm. You know, they are somewhat independent, but still very dependent. So I don't know that that's the right word, but just celebrating, I don't know, a word of, it's such a great time for learning, because they're on their own, but yet I don't know what the word is. I am struggling with the word.
Well, I think I agree with you in that. I think most of us, some of the things we were reading, just how you know, in America, as Amanda was just saying, the single dwelling homes, we have a complexity in our society that seems like we've had to layer on somehow preparing for the society. And so that's maybe, you know, I don't know how long, you know, how old that is, if it's less than 100 years old, but we seem to be incubating immaturity in, you know, sometimes inadvertently by the way we're educating. And so if we, you know, we've been trying to figure out how do we continue to give them responsibilities. What was it? Leigh used to talk about the Jewish culture and the bar mitzvah at the age of 12, and 12 seemed to always be a significant changing of, you know, or of recognition or of testing yourself or pushing yourself in a way that brought you to a new realization of the world. And so, and your place in it and your responsibility in it and the goodness in it. So I think, yeah, I don't know what word we're going to have to use or what we'll end up coming up with, but something that is multi-generational, strengthening the generation, not making them less responsible or more apt to be passive in this life, but to really have an energy, a wonder, a curiosity, a hope, some faith, hope, and love. You know, we want to cultivate these things in them for whatever this next season looks like. But I appreciate that, Leigh. Yeah, I don't. You know, we call it high school because that's just a quick way to transfer an experience that most are familiar with in this culture, and that it's a 9 to 12 or 9th grade to 12th grade or 10th grade to 12th grade experience. But the whole model of the education that we swim in is a manufacture date model. It's, you know, you push your kid through the system by their manufacture date. And so, so we're trying to reclaim that and possibly think more holistically of one generation passing to the next generation. And what are the things that we hope to pass in the society? I think it's G.K. Chesterton that says, education is just the soul of the society passing from one generation to the next. So we're trying to figure out how we talk about it in a way that maybe isn't so hinged to a manufacture date. So,
I mean, is it young adults? You know, I know lots of churches call their young adult ministry, which kind of encompasses this, you know, they are young in their adulting, like Amanda said. So maybe.
Good.
Maybe. Oh. Yeah, so I know I have a friend that calls it grade 13. He'll say, what are we doing for grade 13? Like, what's next? Why don't we have more options? You know, things like that. So,
well, and of course, in the CC world, we want to say challenge 5 and 6 and 7,
yes.
you know, but anyway.
You
have a book group with a great griller. That's a good one. 5, 6, and 7.
Get them grilling.
uh-huh.
Get dad off the grilling. Get the next generation. on the
That's
grill.
right.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Well, like even the phrase next gen, like all the words currently that are modern terms for this are kind of in co-op for certain negative things, and we're trying to reclaim it as all positive. So it's
Yeah.
going to take some time to do that.
Mm.
But anyway, all right, Heather, thank you so much for being on with us tonight. We are out of time,
So
and
helpful.
Julie and I will be producing another podcast or book club in 15 minutes, so we need some time. Please consider coming back, and Amanda and Julie, we'll get the guest schedule right one of these days.
We
Yeah,
will, because
we
I'm
will.
looking. Yeah, we'll get it. We'll get it right.
We'll get it.
It'll be a surprise. The element of surprise.
A good dinner
That's
time
right, which we're not talking
conversation.
about
Curiosity.
Thursday.
Right.
Yeah.
A dinner time conversation has always got
That's
a little
right.
Scotia surprise in it.
Yes, that's
Yes.
good.
Yes.
Okay, well,
Thanks.
thank you for joining us for Markers and Milestones, and we look forward to our guests and having more conversations. Thank you so much, team. Bye.
Bye. It's been great to be with
Bye.
you. Bye.